May 1, 2015 began like any other morning in Jalisco, but by afternoon, the skies roared with the sound of gunfire and explosions. A military helicopter spiraled down in flames as chaos erupted across the streets. Buses burned, roads were blocked, and the city trembled under the force of El Mencho's unprecedented assault. A brazen show of power that would shock the nation and leave the army reeling. The sun rose over Jalisco that morning with a calm that belied the storm to come. Streets filled with the usual rhythm of life. Markets opening, children heading to school, and workers commuting through the narrow avenues of Guadalajara and its surrounding towns. Families moved through the plazas and neighborhoods unaware that the quiet of the morning was about to be shattered by one of the boldest attacks ever seen in Mexico's modern history. El Mencho, the leader of the cartel Jalisco Nueva Generation, had spent months planning an operation that would demonstrate the full force of his cartel and the reach of his power. The intelligence gathered, the positions marked, and the men briefed. Every detail was orchestrated with precision. Early reports from law enforcement noted unusual movements on the outskirts of the city. Convoys of armed vehicles moving with speed and coordination. The heavy presence of gunmen signaling that something extraordinary was underway. By late morning, authorities were already on alert, but they could not anticipate the scale of the assault that was about to unfold. Helicopters from the Mexican army had been deployed to monitor the region. Following the cartel's growing footprint in western Mexico, the forces were aware that the CJNG had been expanding aggressively, clashing with rival groups, and consolidating control over drug routes. The operation was intended to track the movements of armed convoys, protect civilians, and assert government presence. As the day wore on, the CJNG moved into position with astonishing speed. Men armed with high-powered rifles, explosives, and rocket-propelled grenades took strategic locations along highways, bridges, and urban thoroughfares. Vehicles were positioned to create blockades, while additional forces waited in the hills and less traveled paths, cutting off reinforcements and escape routes. Witnesses in surrounding towns later described a sudden, inexplicable sense of tension in the air, an almost tangible fear that something violent was imminent. At approximately 11:30 in the morning, the first exchanges began. Convoys carrying army personnel were met with gunfire from multiple directions. The CJNG's coordination and preparedness became immediately apparent as they struck simultaneously at roadblocks, convoy positions, and communication points. Explosions tore through streets, and the sounds of automatic weapons echoed against the mountains and valleys surrounding Jalisco. Civilians fled in panic, abandoning vehicles and seeking shelter wherever they could. Fire spread quickly from abandoned cars and buses set ablaze by cartel operatives, and smoke rose in thick, black clouds over the city. Reports from the scene later confirmed that at least 30 blockades had been established in key locations, preventing the movement of reinforcements and isolating the conflict zones. As the day progressed, the situation escalated dramatically. Military helicopters sent to provide reconnaissance and support were suddenly targeted. Gunmen with RPGs took positions in elevated areas, calculating angles and timing to strike with deadly accuracy. One helicopter, carrying several soldiers, was hit directly. Flames consumed the aircraft as it fell from the sky, spinning and tumbling until it crashed onto the ground. Eyewitnesses described a fireball that lit the streets and a shockwave that shattered windows blocks away. 8 soldiers and a police officer were killed instantly. The attack stunned authorities and civilians alike. It was the first time in Mexico's history that a cartel had successfully shot down a military helicopter in broad daylight. The symbolism of the act sent a clear and chilling message: El Mencho's reach was absolute, and the CJNG would not hesitate to challenge the state with the most extreme measures. Following the downing of the helicopter, chaos spread through the city with unstoppable momentum. CJNG operatives ignited fires in public spaces, overturned vehicles, and set up roadblocks to maintain control over key routes. Smoke filled the streets, and flames leaped from tires, buses, and buildings as firefighters and emergency responders struggled to contain the destruction. Traffic came to a standstill, and people sought shelter in homes, businesses, and schools. The speed and scale of the operation reflected months of preparation and intelligence gathering. And the audacity of the attacks revealed the extent to which the cartel had grown in power and confidence. Every move appeared coordinated, as if a single mind guided the actions of hundreds of men simultaneously, throughout the day. News reports filtered in with fragmented accounts of the unfolding violence. Local radio stations interrupted regular programming to cover the attacks, while television networks scrambled to confirm casualty numbers and locations of blockades. Residents reported seeing armed men moving through neighborhoods, brandishing rifles and grenades, shouting warnings, and asserting control. Social media exploded with videos and photos showing flames consuming streets and vehicles, smoke billowing across the city skyline, and armored trucks moving in the distance. The intensity of the operation caused panic beyond Jalisco. As neighboring states began to prepare for possible extensions of the violence, authorities quickly mobilized additional military and police units, attempting to regain control. Reinforcements were deployed, but they faced difficulty navigating the widespread blockades, burning debris, and the strategic positioning of armed men. Helicopters, once providing aerial oversight, were grounded or redirected after the downing, leaving ground forces with limited situational awareness. The CJNG used the chaos to move with relative freedom through secondary streets and rural routes, evading capture and continuing to assert dominance over contested areas. Civilians who ventured outside were met with threats, gunfire, or the terrifying sight of cartel operatives enforcing their presence. Mencho's calculated audacity extended beyond the immediate destruction. The CJNG released messages through local channels and social media, signaling that the operation was deliberate, organized, and a warning to both rivals and the government. Banners appeared in some towns, displaying messages of loyalty and power, emphasizing that any opposition would be met with decisive and lethal force. In parallel, intelligence later recovered by authorities showed careful planning, lists of targets, detailed maps of military routes, and coordination with informants who provided real-time updates on government movements. The attack was not only a show of firepower but also a demonstration of strategic intelligence, signaling the cartel's capability to operate as a near-military force. By late afternoon, the immediate violence began to subside, leaving behind a city scarred by fire, destruction, and loss. Streets were littered with debris, burned vehicles, and evidence of firefights. Civilians emerged cautiously to assess the damage, while authorities began the process of recovery, investigation, and containment. The death toll was confirmed at 9 from the helicopter attack alone, with dozens more injured and displaced by fires, explosions, and gunfire. The audacity and scale of the operation ensured that the name of Mencho would dominate headlines for weeks, becoming synonymous with bold defiance of the state and ruthless assertion of control. The events of that day marked a turning point in Mexico's struggle against organized crime. Mencho and the CJNG demonstrated that they were no longer a regional threat confined to Jalisco, but a cartel capable of nationwide influence and military-level operations. Analysts and historians would later describe the day as Black Friday in Jalisco, a moment when the balance of power shifted visibly, and the Mexican government recognized the need for unprecedented coordination and strategy to counter the rising threat. The helicopter downing, combined with the coordinated blockades, fires, and show of force, revealed not just ambition, but the operational capacity, discipline, and logistical expertise that had elevated Mencho to the top of Mexico's most dangerous criminal organizations. The city, scarred but standing, became a testament to both the power of the cartel and the resilience of its people. In the days that followed, federal forces would conduct operations to reclaim streets, pursue cartel operatives, and restore order, but the memory of the audacious attack lingered. Journalists, officials, and civilians alike recounted the terror, the precision, and the unpredictability of a single day that had rewritten the rules of engagement between the Mexican state and the CJNG. The events were not only an attack on military infrastructure but also a psychological strike, showing that Mencho's reach extended into the heart of urban centers and could challenge the authority of the government openly and violently. Mencho himself remained unseen, operating from the shadows, his decisions communicated through lieutenants and field commanders. His ability to orchestrate such a complex and violent operation without exposure became a defining aspect of his leadership. While authorities scrambled to identify and capture those responsible, the CJNG continued to consolidate power, exploiting the chaos and fear that the events had generated. The operation's planning, execution, and aftermath reflected the cartel's evolution from a regional criminal organization into a sophisticated, highly armed, and strategically minded force. By nightfall, the smoke had begun to clear, but the city's scars remained visible. Streets were closed, fires smoldered in abandoned vehicles, and law enforcement worked tirelessly to restore order. Casualties were tallied, and intelligence officers analyzed the events for weaknesses in government response. Every detail, from the timing of blockades to the trajectory of RPGs, was studied to prevent future attacks. Yet the audacity of the operation left authorities and civilians alike with a sense of unease. Jalisco had witnessed a level of violence never seen before, and the world had seen a cartel capable of striking boldly, violently, and effectively. The events of Black Friday would not fade from memory. It became a reference point for law enforcement, analysts, and journalists covering organized crime. A day when Mencho showed that he could confront the Mexican state directly, without fear of immediate reprisal. The helicopter downing, the coordinated urban blockades, and the tactical precision of the CJNG combined to create a tableau of fear, power, and unyielding ambition that would define Mencho's reign and set the tone for future confrontations between cartels and government forces. As the night settled over Jalisco, the city remained tense and alert. Smoke continued to curl from overturned vehicles and scorched streets, carrying the acrid scent of burning rubber and charred metal. Emergency sirens pierced the darkness as firefighters, police, and military units moved cautiously through the affected neighborhoods, checking for hidden explosives and injured civilians. The scale of the destruction forced authorities to prioritize the most critical zones, while intelligence officers worked to map the positions of CJNG operatives and identify their escape routes. The helicopter crash site was cordoned off, soldiers patrolling in wary formation as investigators examined the wreckage for evidence of the attack. Each fragment of twisted metal, each scorch mark, was documented, revealing the precision and force behind the rocket-propelled grenade that had brought down the aircraft. In the early hours of the following morning, officials gathered in emergency operations centers to assess the magnitude of the assault. Communications from affected areas reported roads still blocked, sporadic gunfire in remote neighborhoods, and the lingering presence of armed men moving through less populated streets. Coordination between state and federal forces intensified as the government sought to prevent further escalation and maintain control over the region. Reconnaissance flights resumed cautiously, monitoring CJNG movements from a distance while armed units deployed strategically along major highways and secondary routes. Satellite imagery and ground reports indicated that the cartel had already dispersed much of its personnel, relocating operatives to surrounding mountains, forests, and safe houses to evade capture. By mid-morning, the full extent of the operation became clear. CJNG had employed multiple tactics simultaneously: urban blockades, arson, sniper positions, and ambush points designed to slow reinforcements. Analysts later noted that the speed and coordination suggested months of meticulous planning, including training exercises to simulate government responses and rehearsals for rapid vehicle deployment. Surveillance footage recovered from traffic cameras and private security systems showed the cartel's armored trucks moving in tight formations, men stepping from vehicles to ignite barricades, and others brandishing rifles as they surveyed the city streets. In some areas, police officers reported encountering CJNG operatives who had anticipated patrol routes, establishing choke points that forced security forces into crossfire diversion. The helicopter crash remained the central point of investigation. Military technicians examined the downed aircraft, recovering fragments of the fuselage, rotor, and RPG remnants. Ballistic experts confirmed the attack was carried out with a single, well-aimed shot, highlighting both the skill of the operators and the intelligence behind choosing the attack site. Interviews with surviving crew members and eyewitnesses provided further insight into the chaos that unfolded from above. Soldiers described the sudden impact, the explosion that engulfed the helicopter, and the frantic scramble to rescue those trapped in the wreckage. The loss of life was confirmed as 8 soldiers and 1 police officer, with multiple others injured. leaving families and comrades grappling with the immediate human cost of the assault. In the hours and days that followed, intelligence agencies intensified their focus on El Mencho and the CJNG leadership. Surveillance operations, informant networks, and signal intercepts were mobilized to trace communications and financial movements. Federal authorities prioritized capturing high-ranking cartel members and disrupting their command structure, but the cartel's decentralized and compartmentalized organization complicated efforts. Field reports indicated that El Mencho had remained entirely invisible throughout the operation, communicating only through trusted lieutenants. Analysts noted that the operation's success relied not just on firepower but on meticulous planning, including prior knowledge of military schedules, patrol patterns, and local terrain. Meanwhile, the city began the slow process of recovery. Streets cleared of burning debris revealed damaged vehicles, scorched storefronts, and shattered infrastructure. Public transportation remained suspended in many areas, forcing residents to navigate alternate routes while emergency crews worked to restore electricity, water, and communications. Hospitals reported an influx of injured civilians and law enforcement personnel, attending to gunshot wounds, burns, and trauma from the blockades. Local businesses suffered significant losses, while residents recounted the terror of the day, recalling the roar of gunfire, the sudden fires, and the pervasive sense of danger as armed men moved through their neighborhoods. The social and political impact of the attack rippled through the region. Local government officials coordinated with federal authorities to evaluate response protocols and prevent further escalation. Press conferences emphasized the unprecedented nature of the assault, highlighting the downing of the helicopter as a turning point in cartel-government confrontations. Analysts and journalists detailed the CJNG's capabilities, noting the cartel's rapid mobilization, heavy weaponry, and apparent strategic intelligence. The event was widely reported internationally, drawing attention to Mexico's ongoing struggle against organized crime and the emerging dominance of El Mencho's cartel. Over the following week, law enforcement launched targeted operations to reclaim control. Armored convoys and special forces moved through towns and rural areas, conducting raids and arrests. Several CJNG operatives were captured or neutralized, though the top leadership, including El Mencho, remained elusive. Investigations into the planning of the attack revealed a complex logistical network, including weapons smuggling, communications coordination, and pre-positioned vehicles. Local authorities worked with federal and intelligence agencies to identify accomplices and track financial flows used to fund the operation, revealing the depth of the cartel's resources and influence. At the same time, the CJNG leveraged the aftermath to consolidate power. Operatives returned to neighborhoods to assert dominance, enforce loyalty, and intimidate rivals. Messages were disseminated through graffiti, banners, and social media, demonstrating that the cartel had orchestrated a controlled and calculated operation rather than a chaotic outburst of violence. Citizens reported seeing armed convoys moving through rural areas and observing signs warning against cooperation with authorities. Analysts later concluded that the Black Friday attack served both as a tactical demonstration of force and a psychological strategy, reinforcing El Mencho's reputation as untouchable and demonstrating the limits of government authority in contested regions. International attention also. INCRASEDUS and Mexican authorities shared intelligence and increased pressure on drug trafficking networks connected to the CJNG. The attack underscored the cartel's operational sophistication, prompting reviews of border security, aerial monitoring, and law enforcement coordination. The sophistication of the ambush and the downing of the military helicopter were analyzed in security briefings, with officials emphasizing the unprecedented challenge posed by El Mencho and the CJNG's ability to operate with both audacity and precision. Months after the events, the physical scars in Jalisco remained. Burned streets, destroyed vehicles, and the crater from the helicopter crash remain visible as reminders of the day. Residents recounted the terror of fleeing fires, dodging gunfire, and witnessing the destruction firsthand. Urban planners and emergency responders used the experience to develop improved response strategies for potential future attacks, while military and law enforcement units incorporated lessons learned from CJNG's tactical planning. Analysts noted that the attack had shifted perceptions of cartel capabilities. with El Mencho now seen as a leader able to challenge military forces directly and maintain control over complex, high-risk operations. The Black Friday attack also revealed the challenges of intelligence gathering and counter-cartel operations in a territory where loyalty, fear, and corruption intersect. Informants and local authorities were hesitant to provide information, aware of the cartel's reputation for swift and brutal retribution. Investigations highlighted the difficulty of penetrating CJNG's hierarchical structure, which relied on compartmentalization and coded communications. Analysts concluded that the attack would serve as a model for future operations, demonstrating both the tactical ingenuity and psychological manipulation employed by El Mencho. By the end of the year, while law enforcement had made arrests and seizures, El Mencho remained at large. His ability to evade capture, maintain command, and orchestrate large-scale operations without exposure became central to his notoriety. The helicopter downing and associated attacks were referenced in security briefings, intelligence reports, and media coverage as examples of cartel audacity and operational sophistication. CJNG's visibility in the national and international spotlight increased, with the cartel leveraging its reputation to consolidate influence, expand drug trafficking routes, and intimidate rival groups. The legacy of Black Friday in Jalisco became embedded in both law enforcement strategy and public consciousness. It served as a reminder of the power and reach of the CJNG, the capacity of El Mencho to coordinate military-style attacks, and the vulnerability of even heavily armed forces to the cartel's planning and execution. Streets that once carried the rhythm of daily life now bore witness to the scars of organized crime's most audacious display, shaping the future of cartel-government confrontations in Mexico. Each investigation, each arrest, and each report reinforced the same conclusion: the events of that day were not merely an isolated incident but a declaration of power, capability, and control by El Mencho, a man who had positioned himself as one of the most dangerous and untouchable figures in Mexico's criminal history. The aftermath extended beyond law enforcement and government reaction. Families of the victims, communities disrupted by fires and blockades, and civilians caught in the crossfire all experienced lasting consequences. Psychological trauma, economic losses, and community displacement highlighted the human cost of the assault. Schools, businesses, and public services faced weeks of interruption, while residents grappled with uncertainty and fear. CJNG operatives maintained vigilance in key areas, ensuring that the attack's impact continued to influence behavior and perceptions long after the fires had burned out. Months turned into years, but Black Friday remained a defining moment in Mexico's ongoing struggle against organized crime. Reports, documentaries, and investigations repeatedly referenced the helicopter downing and coordinated blockades as the day when El Mencho demonstrated the full extent of his power. The audacity, planning, and execution of the operation set a precedent for cartel operations across the country, influencing rival groups and shaping government strategy. Analysts continued to study the event, examining the logistics, communication networks, and tactical decisions that allowed a single cartel to inflict such devastation on a major urban area and confront the Mexican army directly. The memory of the day persisted in Jalisco, in Mexico, and beyond. Black Friday became a symbol of the evolving nature of organized crime, a stark illustration of the challenges faced by those attempting to confront a cartel that operated with intelligence, ruthlessness, and foresight. El Mencho remained a figure both feared and respected within the underworld, his ability to plan and execute attacks leaving an indelible mark on the history of Mexico's fight against the CJNG. The city, scarred but standing, bore witness to the consequences of challenging a man who had mastered the art of combining strategy, violence, and intimidation, ensuring that Black Friday in Jalisco would never be forgotten.